Hello, and welcome to our monthly Calm in the Chaos podcast. We're excited to see you this month, and thank you for joining us for this episode. And the beauty of this episode is it's happening through Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm Michele Badie, Program Manager, creator of Keep Your Stride and Calm in the Chaos.
And I'm Valerie, Carmel, licensed therapist and co-host for Calm in the Chaos. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and happy Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes, for sure. So this episode, we're talking about the meeting after the meeting. And I must say, thank you to those that messaged, and not many people commented on the post, of us going live, but I did get some DMs about this, like the meeting after the meeting, like, oh, I feel seen, or oh my goodness, like this is getting some visibility. So that's exciting to know that the topic for this month has resonated with a few people. So the meeting has ended, and most often our brains have not. They're still churning. The escalation call is over. The status meeting is done. And the conversations have not been closed out in our brains, right? With stakeholders, like it's still processing everything. So, somewhere between the laptop closing and our morning alarm, we're often running replays as project management professionals, in our mind, like rewriting a response, not necessarily rewriting a response all the time, but sometimes replaying how a meeting turned out, or feedback like, oh, that landed in a way we didn't expect. So that can be sometimes the breeding ground for second guessing a decision that could have been made under pressure. And that is, in essence, the meeting after the meeting. Nobody scheduled it. Nobody facilitated it. It didn't get a calendar invite. And often no one ever really has taught us, as project management professionals, no one's ever really taught us how to handle that. What do you see when you work with project management professionals? What are some outcomes that you've seen?
One of the more common things is questioning what did they either did wrong, or believing that they did something wrong, or worried that they did something wrong, or wondering what could they have maybe done better. It's always from the standpoint of maybe replaying particular aspects of a conversation. So maybe there was a comment that was made, maybe there was a tone, maybe there was something completely unexpected that came up during that particular meeting and they felt a little bit off guard. And so there's a lot of, honestly, some inner criticism, some self-judgment about that particular meeting. And what is continuing to happen is essentially that replay. From a clinical standpoint, refer to that as ruminations, where you're kind of just going around and round and round, but there isn't actually a solution or end to that actual replay. It's just more and more, what if I had done this? I could have done that better. This could have been better. It's really just a lot of just mental chatter that effectively can sometimes really interrupt how, how the rest of your night goes, right? Whether that is, these thoughts are happening maybe at times when you're supposed to be, having dinner or spending time with your family or friends, and or trying to sleep, and now all of a sudden, your mind is kind of going around and round, kind of like a little bit like a hamster on a wheel, so to speak, in which you are really seeking some kind of answer to a question that was not even really clearly posed. It's just your mind kind of trying to find something that is wrong, and not really being sure what to do to make it right.
And I think that aligns with what many of us project management professionals encounter, is getting rewarded for composure under pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
often get rewarded for that. And, that can be and showing anything different. Like we learned early that showing the debrief that we're referring to could be a liability. It could seem like we are not confident, we are not skilled, we are not experienced in executing our meetings and outcomes and tasks and next steps and all the things with our daily interactions and expectations and navigating that. And it can definitely come off as a liability if we present differently in any other way. Not for everyone,
True, true.
but for
And I think, um, sorry, I cut you off. Okay. So what I was going to say is I think in a lot of ways that can be not just a liability in some ways in terms of people kind of not wanting to demonstrate maybe or show emotion in certain spaces, but what it effectively does is really create a lot of restriction and limitations in people's ability to really process experiences, and that in a lot of ways is what's leading to the replay, right? It felt like something didn't necessarily land maybe the way that you had intended, and so but then there's no clear course to kind of maybe seek external input or feedback, because then it may, to your point, it may come across as if that you are not as confident in the way that you demonstrated or articulated yourself in a meeting. And while that can oftentimes be a organizational culture in which people may have that particular expectation, what it can sometimes do is really lead to a lot of emotional restrictiveness in spaces that may not necessarily benefit from you being so limited. I'm going to go with that word, limited in your ability to openly discuss what you are maybe experiencing or thinking. And I think that there's definitely a healthy way to do it, and there's a way that can kind of get in the way of your day-to-day affairs and how you show up at work. And so, when it comes to what that experience maybe looks like, what are some of those things that would often trigger those moments the most?
and leading into that, to just clearly state the invisible debrief is not a flaw. It's not a flaw. It's not something that I think it's often spoken about offline. And so, to answer your question in regards to what could trigger that, it could be the most smallest thing, just a reaction in a chat. It doesn't have to be like an explosive experience. It could be someone misinterpreting an ask or a statement, or the takeaway is different than what's expected. And it's like, we have talked about this after so many meetings and so many times, and I pre-read for this. And, in your mind is churning, but you're not going to put that in the chat. But in your mind, you're like, how did we get here? I thought we talked about this. And did I did I miscommunicate? Like, I think sometimes as project management professionals will fully take on the accountability and onus of what went wrong, perception of what went wrong. And oftentimes it just could be miscommunication, or the person understood exactly what you asked. They understood exactly the situation, and they just wanted to present an opposing thought or something else to add to it, not necessarily dismissing anything that you've said or asked, but just adding another layer. And sometimes if that little clarification is not provided, it can go left in your mind because the connector isn't there, which is why communication is so important, and understanding others, not being said, being able to read the room is essential. All of those can impact the depth of a debrief that can happen at any given time, the invisible debrief that can happen at any given time.
Hmm. Hmm. Is there a difference in terms of how, maybe in terms of the overall kind of role, or maybe, or ultimately, even when people are, does it matter like the size of the team you're working with? Do you find that there are other additional factors that could really make that experience a little bit more common?
In regards to,
In regards to kind of that, in the that invisible debrief, like, are those moments maybe more likely during at particular phases of a particular project, where people may be thinking more deeply about particular things, or at particular junctures throughout the year? Or, are there times when those kind of events seem to happen maybe a little bit more than usual?
I think how you said it was perfect. It does, right? It's, I don't know if one happens more than the other, but
Mhm.
you know, sometimes tension is high. People are more intense toward the end of the year, not just because of the holidays, but that the end of the year KPIs impacts bonuses for some people. You get
Mhm.
annual bonuses. If you get annual bonuses, you really wanted to lock up perfect for the end of the year because you want that in quarter one, quarter two, well, quarter when it rolls out. So I think that there's excuse me, not quarter two, but I think that there's always factors. And I think even if, like, for example, when you work in retail, you got to understand the seasons and the holidays because
Mhm.
the store reflects the seasons and the holidays as you walk through it. And I think the same thing, you have to understand the fiscal responsibilities, the KPIs and the budgets and everything that preparing for the budget, working through the budget, executing the budget, defending the budget. You know, all of these things come out when you're doing something as small as making sure everyone's using a license, and you're talking to that one person that has a license issue, and they're like, I just want it just because, but we don't show that you're using it. So how can, validate the need for it when you're not using it? But, some people want it just because it's convenient or just to be able to have access to it. And I said, sometimes when asks come down, it's not always clear why it's being asked. And sometimes people don't want to be fully transparent and explain. Some people are completely transparent. It's just their personal style,
Mhm.
how they choose to communicate. And so it's like understanding how that person communicates and being the translator sometimes. And sometimes you can't because it's confidential information. You can't share that, but still creating the buy-in. So to answer your question, I do believe it depends on the situation, it depends on the team. It also depends on the chemistry of the team. And it also depends on the different levels that are interacting with the team too. Because if everyone's up, it might not be relevant. But if you have different ones reporting and you're giving say you're reviewing a report and you're like, my report's not being read. Well, is there a clear call to action? Are your KPIs clear? Is the expectation of the report clear? Are you working off of a template of a report to make sure that it translates well all the way up to the C-suite and they understand the status and of course the call to action? Or is it just something that they're skimming over and they ask you for a different report because they don't understand the report that you gave,
Gave them in
right?
the first place. Mm.
Right. That happens. And sometimes it's like there could be a little stubbornness tied to it. Well, I gave you the report and I need you to read this report. And sometimes flexibility might need to be visited a little bit about what that data storytelling is when it comes to that. And all that can cause an invisible debrief because in your mind, I gave them the information. And the recipient is like, I don't even know what they gave me.
Yeah,
I
it sounds like there's
this
definitely
and I got.
that inner monologue.
So I mean, that's just one of many examples, that it can show up, but it's the most sometimes unexpected things that can trigger someone to go into an invisible debrief. It's not necessarily a conflict. It can be miscommunication and not alignment, but it's not from a negative conversation where people just don't want to hear what the other person says.
And I think that's such an important point to make, is that 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 invisible debrief is not necessarily a sign that something is wrong, right? I think it's really easy to kind of think that, oh, I'm still thinking about this particular interaction. There must have been something wrong, and so that likely is what's kind of fueling the ongoing, thinking and searching for a potential solution, but there may not necessarily be a clear cut problem. It may just have been just something that you are acknowledging or recognizing in the midst of that communication or that interaction, that you now are, you know, by nature, you guys are project managers and are definitely problem solvers. So naturally, anytime there's anything that seems like, oh, could this potentially be a problem? Is there an opportunity to create a solution? But sometimes it may just be something that you need to take notice of, and just something to be aware of for future interactions or things that can be utilized at a later date. So I love that particular point. Doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong.
No, but I want to go back and connect this to when you were talking about ruminating and how
Mhm.
can us as project management professionals tell the difference? Like at 2 a.m., is it really ruminating? Like, what does that mean?
So, I would say if you're waking up at 2 a.m. and thinking about it, yeah, it's probably a rumination. So when we're thinking about, is this just something that I'm processing and trying to, figure, maybe I'm just being more observant, right? And replaying an interaction, because maybe there were some points that maybe landed a little bit differently than you had expected. And so there's naturally some level of seeking, right? It's processing and seeking. Rumination is more to the point of, it's not just seeking, it's more to, it kind of keeps you feeling more so like it's not actually beneficial, right? So if you are thinking of, from a therapy standpoint, we talk about like this worry cycle, right? So most of the time when people think about worry, it's like, oh, this is a bad thing. But worry in and of itself is not actually negative. It's supposed to lead you towards identifying a problem and hopefully identifying, an actual solution. So if I'm worried that next week we might have an issue with this particular stakeholder, then I may begin planning and thinking about ways to initiate potential solutions. That is way more productive. But if we're just thinking, and that question leads to an additional question and another question, but there's no actual answers or clarities or anything that feels very tangible at the end of that thought process, that definitely is way more can't even speak today, ruminative, in that we are just kind of spinning our wheels, hamster on a wheel, running and running, doing, exerting lots of energy, but not really going anywhere. So, especially if you're waking up in the middle of the night and then thinking about this particular thing, if it's interrupting your sleep, interrupting, your day-to-day movements, if it's still kind of replaying the day a day later or a week later, there's likely some things that we need to really kind of clarify and understand in order to kind of pull our brain out of that space, because that's a lot of mental energy that's being utilized and being burned in the use of lots of thought processes that don't seem to really be going anywhere.
And what's the long-term effect of that? Like, bring per can you bring further perspective to how does that impact us long term?
Yeah,
Because we often we often move, and this is almost any professional, but for project management professionals, we just keep plugging. We're like, we're going, we got this, not a problem, not realizing it's chipping.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, like anything else, especially when it comes to stress, it's cumulative, right? It isn't the first day that you're maybe thinking about this particular interaction that you may notice all of the negative impacts of it, right? It may just be, oh, maybe it interrupted your sleep for tonight, but then tomorrow you'll sleep in late, or, you know, try to get some extra sleep later on that the following night. Sometimes we will just compensate and find ways to kind of rebalance it. But if it's a consistent and persistent situation, then what it can actually do is kind of begin to create a very negative connotation with that particular experience. So if you are finding yourself having many, invisible debriefs after a particular meeting, or if it's after an interaction with a particular person and that becomes very consistent, what happens is the brain becomes very predictive and it starts to anticipate that, oh, here is that thing again that the last time led us to kind of react in this way. And so now we can kind of initiate some level of apprehension and maybe even a little bit of, a adrenaline kind of beginning to form in anticipation of this is going to be a problem or this is going to be uncomfortable. And so over time, that can really begin to impact the way that we perceive particular interactions, people, or even experiences. And that over time can really begin to impact the way that you interact with your stakeholders as well as your colleagues.
I love that. So one thing that Val and I are championing throughout this year is the Art of Done, and you can learn more about it at theartofdonepm.com, and you can get the download and just more information about the Art of Done. And so the Art of Done is not just about closing out a task. It is a signal to the nervous system that work is contained in a safe place to release it. And so, Val, can you talk about like what this looks like from like the tactical brain dump or the physiological reset as it applies to the meeting after the meeting?
Yeah. When we're thinking about how to apply the art of done to this invisible debrief, the first thing to do is, of course, recognize that that's what you're actively doing. Sometimes we can be engaged in a behavior and we do it so often that it kind of flies under our radar and we don't even recognize that we're doing it. So the first thing is always awareness. Like, oh, recognize and check in with yourself to see that I've kind of been replaying this Monday meeting and now it's Thursday. Okay, so clearly this is something that is on my mind and effectively impacting me. And so one of the ways to begin to apply the art of done is to do something physical. And that can be through taking a deep breath at the end. That could be at the end of your shift going for a walk, or maybe after that meeting, taking some time to step away from that the initial kind of triggering point of the invisible debrief, because ultimately when we become stressed, right, and our body has to react to it, what it wants to do is mobilize. Our bodies are designed to move in response to a stressor. And so when we are kind of maybe still replaying replaying this particular interaction or conversation, and you're sitting with this invisible debrief, your body is kind of waiting for it to like move into action and kind of finish out and conquer this particular stressor. So if you just sit with it all day, the body has not gotten the signal that we're done with this particular stressor. So mobilization is really, really important. And then the next piece of that is always going to be to do something cognitively, right? Because we're thinking about something. So we want to make sure that we try to clarify our thoughts. So let's take some time to reflect, but reflect with some level of order and structure, not just, while you're washing dishes and just keep thinking about keep thinking about it while you're folding the laundry. Like, no, stop, get a note, get a piece of paper and some pen. I'm definitely old school. For the people who like to do it in their phone, that's totally fine. But you want to really try to clarify, okay, what am I actually feeling? What actually did I believe that kind of led to this particular feeling? Because that's super important, because what we believe, our interpretation may be very different than what actually happened. So a person may have just asked a question, and what you may have interpreted that as this person was being resistant and didn't want to engage in this particular thing, or that I was getting negative feedback, when it may have actually just been clarification, and that person just needed more insight. So I think taking it a step back to not just acknowledging what you're feeling, but understanding what the interpretation was that led to that feeling can really give you a lot more clarity and insight as to what it is that is keeping you somewhat locked in into this invisible debrief. And then once you really understand what you are feeling and why you're feeling that way, then you can determine, is this something that I need to actually do something about? Because sometimes it's just for you to recognize, like, hey, I realize I may have a particular sensitivity in this particular area, and I'm just, maybe you've had a previous interaction with this person, and I'm, projecting that this is something that they're saying when it may not be. So I think that number one gives you a lot more accountability to take hold and control of what you are thinking. And then you can decide, is this something that needs to actually warrant a response, if any? And if not, then learning to accept it, and recognize how can you maybe utilize that information for you to kind of better how you interact with your peers in the future, or you can just release it. Sometimes not everything we think or feel has to, that we need to do a whole big thing about. I mean, and that's kind of low-key coming from a therapist. Sometimes you just gotta accept that this is what you feel and be okay with it, let it go, and then move on. So I think that the art of done really does provide a great way to incorporate some of the mobilization physical movements that our body needs to really recognize that, hey, we are done with this particular stressor. But then also we need to then go through a little bit of the kind of like Socratic questions of asking, why do I feel this way? What am I doing? Did this work out okay? Just to really kind of get to the real root of why you're feeling locked into this debrief.
Okay, I want to like circle there for a minute because these are I love it. So, name it, contain, process it, release it, and identify the key insight. So I want to go back to process it because that's where the lift is, right? And so continuing on, we can determine next steps. So when we recognize it, because one thing I find myself saying or reminding people or asking people, what is your muscle memory of me? Like why can't you
question?
Like, why are you acting like this is new?
That's so real.
Or why are you acting as if you've never experienced this before? Whatever this is, good. It's okay. But I'm like, how's that muscle memory coming?
That's such a great way to put that, though. Like, I think that plays such an important part, right? Because yes, the processing is the heavier lift, right? It's where low key kind of getting stuck in, and I think part of that is, I think oftentimes because of the fact that there has been this expectation on project managers to be the person who has to be so composed and able to kind of navigate all of these maybe conflicting emotions and needs and perspectives, that sometimes it can lead to you being quite I don't want to say necessarily restrictive, but you definitely tend to learn how to hold back a lot of what you may be feeling or thinking in the moment in order to really kind of allow the flow of whatever that day or interaction needs to be. And so a lot of it is kind of being held, right? In, like, imagine if you were having a really difficult time and you're walking around with a basket. And so like in every interaction, you're like taking all of these particular notes and you're just filling this basket with all of the things that may have happened that day that you were like, oh, that was weird. Oh, that was uncomfortable. Oh, this was strange. And so then at the end of the day, you just have a bunch of like mixed items in a basket that don't necessarily all go to the same recipe. It's not like there's like flour, sugar, vanilla. It's like,
The sauce don't match.
yeah, like all the items don't necessarily go together. And so you might be left with like sardines, ice cream, like a potato. And you're like, what do I do with all of this stuff? Because maybe they don't necessarily go together. And I think part of that is allowing yourself to recognize, okay, if I'm focusing on this particular point, right? Go back to what that moment actually was. So you need to kind of like see if you can put yourself back into that space and try to actively low-key kind of relive it, just to kind of see what actually happened. A great activity that I'll have patients do in session when they're struggling with processing something, I have them repeat it to me in third person. So like you are the narrator and you're watching this whole exchange happen. Tell me from that perspective, what did you see?
So these are my three questions I want to
Mm-hmm.
align with your share. What actually happened? Because that helps with the third person reference, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Making it mean, because we can twist something. That's just human.
Absolutely. That's human behavior.
We can twist it. It's like, what? Like, okay, good, bad, and different. It doesn't, either way.
No.
Because we can romanticize something just as much as we can grieve it and act like this is the end of the world. And the third question is, what do I want to carry forward from it? Because that helps immediate, well, I don't know if immediate's the right word, but it helps perspective percolate clearly.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you want to feel like after you've done this processing and this reflection, you want to actually feel like it was useful, right? So what can you take, what insight, what reflection, what maybe now step do you need to take on moving forward in order for you to feel like you are taking a little bit more of initiative and control in regards to the invisible debrief, because sometimes the invisible debrief is happening and you didn't actually intentionally call for it. It just started happening, right? You were minding your own business, doing your own thing, and then all of a sudden now you're thinking about this interaction that you had, and you don't necessarily want to be in it, but here you are. So I think really ending it with what can you take from it and what can you take moving forward can really be helpful to kind of officially kind of close out that loop, so you feel like, okay, I processed it, I got some clarity, and now I know why I felt this way, and now I know also what I want to do about it.
For sure. So as we wrap up, let's combine the art of done and the invisible debrief with a thought that is often a challenge, or let me say this, a work in progress for many project management professionals to embrace is, this is good enough for today.
Yeah, man. I think that in terms of being able to feel like you are going to implement the art of done for that specific thought process is to effectively end it with what was your win, because that's something that I find project managers often have a hard time focusing on. We tend to really focus more on what still needs to be done rather than what we actually got completed. And so starting off with our win, clarifying what our next step is going to be for the next day to kind of plan it out, and then end it with whatever physiological sign you want to give yourself, whether that is officially going for a walk, changing your clothes. You want to give your brain an actual cue to that helps to connect that we are done with work and now we're moving into our personal time and our personal life. Again, I've shared in the past, I have my salt lamp behind me, and that's usually what I turn on when I'm done working. That lets me know, okay, you know, microphone off, lights are off, but I'm going to turn on this soft light. And that's what cues to my brain, okay, we're like shifting into the evening and I can go, make dinner or watch a movie or spend some time with my son. And that helps to kind of give that cue. So your physiological cue can be anything. It just needs to be something that is connected to your senses. So how something feels, light, sound, whatever that needs to be. And that can really help to really effectively close out that loop for the day.
I love that. For me, I want to make sure that my mind is clear enough that when I wake up in the morning, nothing mentally stops me from getting to my Pilates class.
I love that.
For me, it's to make sure my day starts like in practicing the art of done, what it's really continued, it's always showing me something new because we are intentionally making an effort to practice
Mhm.
what we do. So for me, it's like clear my thoughts. And it could be a walk, it could be all the things that you just mentioned that you practice with your family. But for me, it's like I want to clear those cobwebs out so I can get rest because when that alarm goes off, wee hour of the morning in my mind to make that early morning Pilates class, I don't want to hit it because I didn't get enough sleep or whatever goes in there. But I in my day where I'm up and I'm not like snooze. I'm just not mentally because I'm mentally fatigued. I don't want that.
Very true. That's a great point, right? It's not just about how we end things, but also how we're starting things off, right? And so if we're kind of letting the day before linger and kind of carry over into the following day, you may be starting off your mornings a lot heavier than you need to. So I love that you are already thinking about the next morning and what that's going to look like. Love that.
Our moods, I often say that PMs, project and program managers, we're the temperaments of a project and a program. We are the temperament. Sometimes some depending on how teams work, if some members are siloed or you're in a remote environment, hybrid, or even, if you're in the office, it all depends. But how we interact with people impacts their day, even when we're enforcing accountability. Like we can enforce it, but are you kind? I was telling someone, I forget who I was saying this to. We had this conversation this week, but I was like, we're the ones that are pretty cool to be around, but we don't always get invited to sit at the lunch table because we hold everyone accountable.
I love that. I mean, hey, it's everybody needs that person in their life, both professionally and personally. So, I mean, you're definitely mine. So,
I'm like, hey, and they're like, oh my gosh. And then they'll witness something with you interacting with someone else, like, oh, they're cool or oh, they're this. And it's like, we're human too. We have
absolutely.
just because we're holding you accountable and not letting up, whatever that looks like. And for all of us, it looks different. Like invite us to sit with you. Invite us to the table.
Listen,
Let's bring our
you guys
yeah.
are like a plethora of information, man.
Yeah.
I love talking to people.
Well, we wish you well, one, thank you for joining for this monthly chat that we're having about our mental health. And we hope that you end the Mental Health Awareness Month strong and moving in peace. Whatever strong is for you, like prioritizing yourself while showing up at the same time.
Absolutely. Take some time to pour into yourselves in whichever way that looks like. And we will see you guys again next month for our next Calm in the Chaos.
Thanks, everyone.